I helped my coworker's daughter get into college. Then police officers raided my classroom. The classroom door slammed open during my lecture on Renaissance poetry. 3 uniformed officers entered with hands on their holsters, followed by Principal Garrett and 2 people in dark suits. The woman in front spoke with cold authority. "Andrew Holloway?" My students stopped taking notes and stared at me with wide eyes. I set down my copy of Shakespeare and nodded, my throat suddenly dry. The woman pulled out a badge. "I'm Detective Linda Graves with the Cybercrime Division. We have a warrant for your electronic devices and we need you to come with us immediately." My hands started shaking as I looked at the faces of my 18 seniors, all frozen in confusion. I had been teaching English at Riverside Academy for 9 years, without a single disciplinary issue. Now police were treating me like a criminal in front of my students. "There must be some mistake," I managed to say, though my voice cracked. Detective Graves gestured to the 2 officers behind her. "Mr. Holloway, we can do this quietly or we can make it difficult. Your choice." One officer moved toward my desk and began unplugging my computer while another stood blocking the doorway. The students whispered among themselves, and I could see phones being pulled out to record what was happening. My career was being destroyed in real time. Principal Garrett stepped forward with his hands clasped nervously. "Andrew, please cooperate with the officers. We'll sort this out at the station." He wouldn't meet my eyes, which told me he already believed whatever they had accused me of. I held up my hands in surrender and stepped away from my desk. "Can someone at least tell me what this is about?" Detective Graves opened a folder and pulled out several printed screenshots. "We have evidence that you've been engaging in financial fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit wire fraud involving college admissions. You used your position of trust to exploit students and their families for personal gain." The accusation hit me like a physical blow. Financial fraud? Identity theft? I had never stolen anything in my life. The only thing I could think of was helping Rebecca Dawson, my coworker's daughter, with her college applications 6 months ago. Christine Dawson taught chemistry at Riverside and had asked if I could review Rebecca's essays since English was my specialty. I had spent hours helping Rebecca craft her personal statements and polish her writing, all completely free because Christine was my friend and colleague. How could that possibly be interpreted as fraud? "I think you're confusing mentorship with criminal activity," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I helped a colleague's daughter with her college applications. That's not illegal." Detective Graves smiled without warmth. "Mr. Holloway, we have evidence that you accepted $25,000 to write Rebecca Dawson's essays, forge recommendation letters from teachers who never wrote them, and fabricate extracurricular activities that never occurred. We also have evidence you did this for at least 6 other students over the past 2 years, collecting over $200,000 in payments." The number was so absurd that I almost laughed. $200,000? I drove a 12-year-old sedan and lived in a modest apartment because teaching salaries barely covered my expenses. If I had that kind of money, my life would look completely different. That's absolutely not true. I never accepted any money from anyone. I helped Rebecca because her mother asked me to, and I did it for free as a favor. The second detective, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "Mr. Holloway, we have bank records showing deposits into an account registered in your name. We have emails detailing your services and pricing structure. We have testimony from parents who paid you thousands of dollars for guaranteed college acceptances." One of the officers finished packing my computer and teaching materials into evidence boxes, while students continued filming everything on their phones. I could already imagine the headlines and social media posts that would destroy my reputation within hours. The walk through the hallway felt endless as other teachers and students watched me being escorted out by police. I saw Christine Dawson standing outside her classroom with tears streaming down her face, and she turned away when I tried to make eye contact. Whatever evidence they had against me had already convinced her I was guilty. The police car ride to the station gave me time to think about what could have happened. Someone had clearly set up a bank account in my name and created fake emails to make it look like I was running an illegal college admissions consulting business. But who would do that and why? I had no enemies that I knew of. No jealous colleagues or angry parents who might want to frame me for crimes I hadn't committed. The only thing that made sense was that this was connected to Rebecca's college application somehow. But I couldn't figure out how helping her write essays could lead to accusations of fraud involving 6 other students I had never even met. At the police station, I was processed like any other criminal suspect. They took my fingerprints, photographed me, and confiscated my phone and wallet. Detective Graves led me to an interrogation room with concrete walls and a metal table bolted to the floor. She spread out documents across the table showing bank statements, email printouts, and what appeared to be contracts for college admissions consulting services. Every document had my name on it, my supposed signature, and details about services I had never offered. "Mr. Holloway, I'm going to be direct with you. We have overwhelming evidence of your criminal enterprise. Parents have come forward with receipts, contracts, and testimony about the services you provided. Your bank account shows regular deposits matching the amounts these parents paid. Your emails detail exactly what you were offering and how much you charged." She pushed one email toward me that showed a message from my school email address to a parent named Douglas Freeman, offering to write his daughter's college essays and create fake recommendation letters for $15,000. The writing style didn't match how I normally communicated. and I had never heard of Douglas Freeman or his daughter. This email didn't come from me, I said, studying the header information. Someone must have hacked my school account or created a fake account that looks like mine. Detective Graves leaned back in her chair with obvious skepticism. Mr. Holloway, we had forensic analysts examine these emails. They originated from your computer at Riverside Academy during school hours when you were logged into the system. The IP address matches your classroom location, and the timestamps correspond with your free periods when you had access to your computer. The technical details sounded convincing, but I knew I had never sent those emails. Either someone had gained access to my computer when I wasn't in my classroom, or they had somehow remotely accessed my account to send messages that would look authentic. I remembered several times over the past few months when I had left my classroom unlocked during lunch or planning periods to grab coffee or use the restroom. Anyone could have walked in and used my computer during those times. I need to speak with a lawyer before I answer any more questions, I said, exercising the only right I knew I had left. Detective Graves nodded and stood up from the table. That's your choice, but I should tell you that cooperation at this stage could make a significant difference in how the prosecutor handles your case. They placed me in a holding cell while I waited for the public defender's office to send someone to represent me. The cell was small and cold, with a metal bench and a toilet in the corner. I sat down and tried to process everything that had happened in the past 3 hours. This morning, I had been a respected teacher discussing metaphor and imagery with my students. Now I was sitting in a jail cell, accused of orchestrating a massive fraud scheme involving college admissions. The worst part was knowing that, even if I was eventually cleared of all charges, the damage to my reputation was already permanent. Students and parents would always remember that the police had raided my classroom and arrested me. Other teachers would always wonder if there had been some truth to the accusations. My career at Riverside Academy was effectively over regardless of the legal outcome. The public defender arrived 2 hours later, a young woman named Jessica Torres, who looked exhausted and overworked. She reviewed the evidence against me with growing concern, flipping through page after page of damaging documents that painted a picture of systematic fraud. Mr. Holloway, I'm going to be honest with you. The evidence against you is substantial and very convincing. If this goes to trial, a jury is going to see bank accounts, emails, and witness testimony all pointing to your guilt. I explained everything about helping Rebecca with her college applications and how I had never accepted money or worked with any other students in that capacity. Jessica took notes, but her expression remained skeptical. The problem is that Rebecca Dawson and her mother are both cooperating with the prosecution. They've provided testimony that contradicts your version of events. The news that Christine was testifying against me felt like another betrayal on top of everything else. We had been friendly colleagues for 5 years, sharing lesson plans and grabbing lunch together in the teacher's lounge. She had specifically asked me to help her daughter, emphasizing that Rebecca was struggling with her writing and needed guidance from an expert. I had spent hours working with Rebecca on her essays, helping her develop her ideas and improve her composition skills. Everything had been above board and completely free. What exactly are Christine and Rebecca saying about me? I asked. Jessica consulted her notes, and her expression became more troubled. They claim you approached Rebecca last spring with an offer to guarantee her acceptance to top universities in exchange for $25,000. They say you wrote all of her application essays, created fake recommendation letters, and coached her on how to lie during admissions interviews. The description was so completely opposite from what actually happened that I felt dizzy trying to understand how they could make such claims. Rebecca had been a decent student with solid grades but unremarkable extracurricular activities. I had helped her write essays that honestly reflected her experiences and interests, never fabricating anything or making promises about admissions outcomes. Jessica, I need you to believe me when I say I never asked for money, and I never fabricated anything. Christine asked me to help her daughter with writing skills, and I did exactly that. Someone has either convinced them to lie, or they're part of whatever scheme is being used to frame me. Jessica closed her folder and looked at me with what might have been sympathy. Mr. Holloway, I want to believe you, but I need to prepare you for the reality that you're going to be charged with multiple felonies. The prosecutor is talking about wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy charges that carry significant prison time. Your best option might be to negotiate a plea deal that minimizes your exposure. The idea of pleading guilty to crimes I hadn't committed was unacceptable, but I also understood that fighting charges with this much manufactured evidence could result in decades in prison if I lost at trial. I needed time to figure out who was behind this and why they had targeted me specifically. My bail hearing was set for the next morning, which meant spending the night in jail with actual criminals who had committed actual crimes. The other men in the holding area gave me curious looks, but mostly kept to themselves. I lay on the thin mattress and stared at the ceiling, trying to piece together a timeline that would explain how someone had built such an elaborate case against me. The bank account in my name must have been opened months ago to establish a pattern of deposits that would look legitimate. The emails must have been sent using sophisticated methods to make them appear authentic when examined by forensic analysts. The parents who claimed to have paid me must have been recruited somehow, either as willing participants in the frame job or as unwitting victims who had actually paid someone and been told that person was me. The only common thread was Rebecca Dawson and her mother Christine, which meant either they were behind the scheme or they were being manipulated by whoever was really responsible. Christine had seemed genuinely upset when I was being escorted out by police, but that could have been an act designed to distance herself from any suspicion. Rebecca had been quiet and somewhat anxious during our tutoring sessions, but I had attributed that to normal stress about college applications. The bail hearing the next morning took place in a crowded courtroom, where I was just one of many defendants being processed through the system. The prosecutor argued that I was a flight risk with access to significant financial resources from my illegal consulting business, requesting that bail be set at $500,000. My public defender argued that I had no criminal record, strong ties to the community, and limited financial means that made flight unlikely. The judge set bail at $100,000, which might as well have been $1 million given my actual financial situation. I was returned to jail while Jessica worked on finding a bail bondsman who might be willing to work with me. By evening, she had arranged for a bond that required $10,000 in cash and my car as collateral. I called my older brother David, who lived 2 hours away, and explained the situation. He sounded shocked and angry, but agreed to wire the money so I could be released. Walking out of jail after 36 hours in custody felt surreal, like I was leaving one nightmare and entering a slightly different version of the same nightmare. Jessica met me outside with more bad news about the case against me. Andrew, the prosecutor has added 3 more victims who claim you defrauded them. They're also charging you with money laundering because the bank account in your name shows transfers to offshore accounts. The charges were escalating faster than I could process them. Money laundering implied organized criminal activity far beyond what I could have accomplished alone, even if I had actually committed the crimes they were accusing me of. Someone was building a case that would put me in prison for the rest of my life. Jessica, I need to investigate this myself because waiting for the legal system to figure out the truth could take years. Can you get me copies of all the evidence they have against me? She hesitated before responding. Andrew, I strongly advise against conducting your own investigation. You could compromise the case or violate your bail conditions. Let me hire a private investigator who knows how to gather evidence legally. I agreed to let her handle the investigation, but I also knew I needed to start asking questions on my own. The first person I needed to talk to was Christine Dawson, even though she was cooperating with the prosecution against me. If she was being manipulated or coerced, I might be able to convince her to tell the truth about what really happened with Rebecca's college applications. I drove to Christine's house that evening, knowing that any contact with witnesses could get me in trouble, but feeling like I had no other choice. Her house was a modest 2-story home in a quiet neighborhood with Rebecca's car parked in the driveway. Christine opened the door, and her expression shifted from surprise to fear when she saw me standing on her porch. Andrew, you can't be here. My lawyer said you're not allowed to contact me or Rebecca. I held up my hands to show I meant no threat. Christine, I just need 5 minutes to understand what happened. We've been colleagues for 5 years, and you know I would never do the things they're accusing me of. Please just tell me why you and Rebecca are saying I asked for money when you know that's not true. She glanced over her shoulder nervously before stepping outside and closing the door behind her. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Andrew, I wanted to tell the truth, but they said if I didn't cooperate, Rebecca would be charged as an accessory to your fraud scheme. They threatened to prosecute her and revoke her college acceptance unless we testified that you approached us with the offer to help her cheat the admissions process. The revelation that Christine and Rebecca were being coerced explained their testimony, but created new questions about who was threatening them and why. Who told you this? Was it the police or the prosecutor? Christine shook her head, tears forming in her eyes. It was a woman named Victoria Lang. She said she was an investigator for the State Education Board looking into college admissions fraud. The name Victoria Lang meant nothing to me, but the fact that someone claiming to be a state investigator was threatening witnesses suggested corruption at a level I hadn't considered. Christine, did Victoria Lang show you any credentials or identification? Christine wiped her eyes and nodded. She had a badge and business cards from the Department of Education. She seemed completely legitimate. I pulled out my phone and did a quick search for Victoria Lang and the State Education Board. There was no one by that name listed on the department's website or in any public records I could find. Christine, I think Victoria Lang is part of whoever is framing me. She's not a real investigator, and she has no authority to threaten you or Rebecca. You need to tell your lawyer about this immediately. Christine's expression shifted from fear to confusion, and then to anger as she realized she had been manipulated. Andrew, I'm so sorry. She was so convincing, and I was terrified of Rebecca getting in trouble. But if Victoria Lang isn't real, then who is she? And why would she want to frame you? That was the question I had been asking myself since the police raided my classroom. I had no enemies with the resources to orchestrate something this elaborate, no jilted lovers or angry parents who might want revenge. The only thing that made sense was that I was being used as a scapegoat for someone else's crimes, but I couldn't figure out whose or why they had chosen me specifically. I left Christine's house with more information, but no clear answers about who Victoria Lang was or how to prove she had coerced witnesses into lying. Jessica had warned me about conducting my own investigation, but I couldn't sit around waiting for the legal system to slowly work through evidence while my reputation and freedom were being destroyed. I needed to find Victoria Lang and figure out what her real agenda was. The next morning, I went to Riverside Academy to clean out my classroom, having been officially terminated by the school board pending the outcome of my criminal case. Principal Garrett met me at the entrance with a security guard to supervise my removal of personal belongings. The hallways were empty since classes were in session, but I could see students and teachers looking out their classroom windows as I walked past. My classroom looked the same as it had before the raid, except my computer and teaching materials were gone, and there was yellow police tape across the doorway. I packed books, photos, and personal items into boxes while the security guard watched my every movement. On my desk, I found a handwritten note that had been slipped under some papers. The note was unsigned, but the message was clear. Stop investigating or Rebecca pays the price. The threat confirmed what I had suspected about Victoria Lang and whoever was behind the frame job. They were watching me and willing to hurt innocent people to protect their scheme. I took a photo of the note with my phone before the security guard could see it, then continued packing my belongings. As I was carrying boxes to my car, I noticed someone watching me from across the parking lot. It was a woman in her 40s with dark hair and professional attire, standing next to a black sedan. When she saw me looking at her, she got into her car and drove away quickly. I tried to see the license plate, but she was too far away and moving too fast. That evening, I met with Jessica at her office to show her the threatening note and tell her about Christine's revelation regarding Victoria Lang. Jessica examined the note with concern, but also frustration. Andrew, this note could be evidence, but it could also make you look like you're harassing witnesses. And your visit to Christine's house violated the conditions of your bail that prohibit contact with anyone involved in the case. I understood her concerns, but I also knew that playing by the rules wasn't going to save me when the other side was clearly willing to break every rule to ensure my conviction. Jessica, someone is threatening to hurt Rebecca if I keep investigating. That means we're getting close to something they want to keep hidden. We need to find Victoria Lang and prove she coerced the witnesses into lying. Jessica agreed to have her private investigator focus on finding information about Victoria Lang while also reviewing the bank records and emails to look for evidence of manipulation or forgery. In the meantime, I was supposed to stay away from anyone connected to the case and avoid doing anything that might jeopardize my defense. I tried to follow her instructions, but I couldn't stop thinking about the woman I had seen watching me in the parking lot at Riverside Academy. She had seemed familiar somehow, though I couldn't place where I might have seen her before. 2 days later, Jessica called me with urgent news. Her private investigator had discovered that the bank account registered in my name had been opened using a forged driver's license and falsified documents. The person who opened the account had used my personal information, but had never appeared in person at the bank, completing everything through online applications and document uploads. More importantly, the investigator had traced the IP addresses used to send the fraudulent emails from my account and found that they originated from a location 30 miles away from Riverside Academy, not from my classroom computer as the police had claimed. Andrew, this is exactly what we need to prove someone was impersonating you. The forensic evidence the police relied on was either wrong or deliberately falsified. The revelation that the police evidence might have been falsified raised disturbing questions about who had the technical capability and law enforcement connections to manipulate an investigation at that level. Jessica's investigator continued digging and discovered that the woman claiming to be Victoria Lang from the State Education Board was actually Victoria Langford, a former college admissions consultant who had been fired from her position 3 years earlier for accepting bribes from wealthy parents. Victoria had been operating an illegal college admissions consulting business where she charged parents enormous sums to guarantee their children's acceptance to prestigious universities through fraudulent applications and fake credentials. When several of her clients had been caught and prosecuted in a nationwide admissions scandal, Victoria had disappeared to avoid her own prosecution. The investigator believed Victoria had resurfaced with a new scheme where she framed innocent teachers for the crimes she was actually committing, using them as scapegoats while she continued her illegal business under different names and identities. I had been selected as her latest victim, possibly because Christine Dawson had mentioned to someone that I had helped Rebecca with her college applications, making me a convenient target who already had a documented connection to the admissions process. Jessica filed an emergency motion to dismiss the charges based on the new evidence of fraud and witness coercion. The prosecutor's office opposed the motion, arguing that Victoria Langford's criminal history didn't prove she was involved in my case, and that the evidence against me was still substantial enough to proceed to trial. The judge scheduled a hearing for the following week to review the new evidence and hear arguments from both sides. During that week, I received another threatening message, this time sent to my phone from an unknown number. The message included a photo of Rebecca walking to her car after school with a caption that read, "Drop the investigation or she disappears." I immediately called Jessica and forwarded her the threatening message. She contacted the police to report the threat, but they were skeptical about whether it was genuine or something I had created myself to support my defense. The prosecutor suggested I might have sent the message to my own phone as part of an elaborate scheme to avoid prosecution. The accusations that I was threatening myself would have been laughable if the situation wasn't so serious. I was fighting for my freedom while someone with significant resources was working to ensure my conviction for crimes I hadn't committed. The hearing finally took place in a packed courtroom with reporters and cameras covering what had become a high-profile case about college admissions fraud. Jessica presented evidence about Victoria Langford's criminal history, the forged bank account documents, the falsified IP address information, and Christine Dawson's testimony about being coerced into lying. The prosecutor argued that Jessica was engaging in conspiracy theories to distract from the overwhelming evidence of my guilt. The judge listened to both sides before announcing his decision. Based on the new evidence presented by the defense, I'm ordering the prosecution to conduct a thorough investigation into Victoria Langford's possible involvement in this case. However, I'm not dismissing the charges against Mr. Holloway at this time. The trial will proceed as scheduled, but the defense will be permitted to present evidence about Victoria Langford's activities. The ruling was a partial victory, but it meant I would still face trial and possible conviction unless we could find Victoria Langford and prove she had orchestrated the entire frame job. Jessica's investigator intensified his search for Victoria, tracking her movements through financial records and surveillance footage from locations where the fraudulent parents claimed to have met with me. He discovered that Victoria had been using multiple aliases and fake identities to operate her consulting business across 3 different states. In each location, she had framed a different teacher or counselor for her crimes before disappearing and setting up operations somewhere new. The pattern was consistent and disturbing. Victoria would identify a teacher who had helped students with college applications in any capacity, then create fake bank accounts and email trails to make it look like that teacher was running an illegal consulting business. She would coerce parents into testifying against the teacher by threatening their children with prosecution, while she continued operating her real illegal business behind the scenes. I was just the latest victim in a series of destroyed lives and careers that Victoria had left in her wake across multiple states. The investigator found 3 other teachers who had been convicted or forced to accept plea deals for crimes that Victoria had actually committed. Armed with this information, Jessica filed a new motion that included sworn statements from 2 of the previous victims who had discovered the truth after serving prison time for Victoria's crimes. The weight of evidence finally convinced the judge to take action. He ordered an independent investigation into Victoria Langford's activities and issued a warrant for her arrest on multiple charges, including fraud, witness tampering, and obstruction of justice. He also agreed to postpone my trial indefinitely while the investigation proceeded. 2 weeks later, federal agents arrested Victoria Langford at a luxury hotel in Miami, where she had been meeting with new clients under another fake identity. When agents searched her hotel room and storage units, they found extensive files documenting her schemes against teachers in multiple states, including detailed plans for how she had framed me. The files included the forged documents used to open the bank account in my name, drafts of the fake emails sent from my account, and recordings of her conversations with parents where she had posed as me during phone calls. Most damning was her journal where she had written about selecting me as her next target after learning from a parent at Riverside Academy that I had helped Rebecca Dawson with college applications. The journal entries described in detail how she had gained access to my classroom during my planning periods, installed keylogging software on my computer to capture my passwords, and used that access to send fraudulent emails that would look authentic when examined by investigators. She had even documented her strategy for coercing Christine and Rebecca into providing false testimony by threatening Rebecca with prosecution as an accessory. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Victoria Langford had orchestrated every aspect of the case against me while continuing to operate her illegal consulting business using my identity as cover. The prosecutor filed a motion to dismiss all charges against me with an apology for the prosecution's failure to investigate Victoria's involvement earlier in the process. The judge formally dismissed every charge and expunged my arrest record, acknowledging that I had been the victim of an elaborate criminal scheme. Victoria Langford was charged with dozens of federal crimes and faced multiple trials in different jurisdictions for her activities across several states. The case received national media attention as journalists exposed the full scope of Victoria's operations and the lives she had destroyed while building her illegal empire. Riverside Academy offered to reinstate me with back pay and a public apology from the school board, but I declined. The damage to my reputation in that community was irreparable, and I couldn't face the students and parents who had witnessed my arrest and believed I was guilty. Instead, I accepted a teaching position at a private school in another state where I could start fresh without the shadow of false accusations following me. Christine Dawson sent me a lengthy apology letter explaining how Victoria had manipulated her and Rebecca and expressing her deep regret for not being stronger and standing up for the truth. Rebecca got into college on her own merits, and her mother made sure everyone knew that I had helped her honestly without any fraud or deception. 3 years later, Victoria Langford was sentenced to 45 years in federal prison after being convicted on multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, witness tampering, and conspiracy. The judge called her crimes particularly heinous because she had destroyed innocent teachers' careers while enriching herself and endangering students. I rebuilt my teaching career slowly, focusing on the students who needed guidance while being more cautious about how I helped with college applications. Every time I write a recommendation letter, I think about how easily trust can be weaponized and how fragile reputation truly is in an age where guilt is assumed before innocence can be proven. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.